While I was attending my uncle's memorial, my mom gave my room to her new husband's son, saying, "He's the man of the house now." She tossed my clothes into a box and told me to find somewhere else to sleep. What she didn't know. My uncle left me a secret gift, the deed to the house. The next morning, I handed her a notice to vacate. She begged, screamed, and then collapsed. I never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. My life took a complete nosedive in a matter of hours, and the people I thought I could trust turned out to be nothing but selfish opportunists. But don't worry, this story has a hell of a twist. So, let's go back to the beginning. I, 23 male, lost my Uncle Robert recently. He was my dad's older brother, and honestly, more of a father figure to me than anyone else. My actual dad had passed away when I was 10, and Uncle Robert stepped up, making sure I never felt alone. He taught me how to drive, how to fix things around the house, and even how to stand up for myself. He was the only real family I had left, or so I thought. My mom, on the other hand? She moved on fast. I don't mean a few years after my dad passed, no. She remarried when I was 12, to some guy named Frank. And Frank came with his own baggage, his son, Ethan, who was just a year younger than me. Let's just say, Ethan and I never got along. While I worked part-time jobs in high school, Ethan got a new car on his 16th birthday. When I got into a good college on scholarships and hard work, Ethan flunked out of community college, and his dad just shrugged it off. And my mom? She doted on Ethan like he was the son she wished she had. I moved out at 18 to live with my uncle, which was the best decision I ever made. He owned a modest but nice house in Pittsburgh, and he never once asked me for a dime in rent. Instead, he said, "Save your money. Someday, you'll need it." I had no idea how right he was. Fast forward to last month, Uncle Robert passed away. It was sudden, unexpected, and absolutely devastating. I barely had time to grieve before my mom started calling me, asking about the house. "Are you moving back home now?" she asked, almost too cheerfully for someone who just lost their brother-in-law. "No," I told her. "I'm staying here for now." "Why?" She just hummed and said, "Oh, no reason. Just thinking about what's best for the family." I should have known something was off. The funeral was tough. I barely held it together as I delivered my eulogy. Uncle Robert had no kids of his own, and I was the closest thing he had to a son. I thought my mother, at the very least, would be supportive. I was wrong. When I got back from the memorial that night, exhausted and emotionally drained, I walked into my house, and saw Ethan sitting on my couch, playing video games. His feet were on the coffee table, shoes still on, as if he'd lived there for years. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked. He barely glanced at me. "Oh, hey. Mom said I could move in." I laughed, because surely, this was a joke. Then my mom walked in, carrying a box filled with my clothes. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my stomach twisting. She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. "Sweetheart, Ethan needs a stable place to stay. Frank and I think it's best if he lives here now." I blinked at her, my brain refusing to process the words. "My room?" I said slowly. "Well, yes. You don't need a whole house to yourself," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Ethan is the man of the house now." I looked at Ethan, who was smirking like he just won the lottery. Something in me snapped. "You can't be serious," I said. "This isn't your house to give away." My mom scoffed. "Oh, honey, Uncle Robert wouldn't have wanted you to live here all alone. It's only fair to share with family." That's when I realized it. She thought the house belonged to her. She thought that, because Uncle Robert was my dad's brother and not hers, the house was up for grabs. She thought she could just move Ethan in and push me out like I was nothing. But there was one thing she didn't know. Uncle Robert left me a letter a few weeks before he died. It was in his safe, along with a deed to this house. My name was on it. I owned the house. Not her. Not Frank. Not Ethan. Me. But I didn't say anything yet. I wanted to see how far she would take this. So I played along. I let her and Ethan get comfortable. My mom went as far as redecorating my room for him, moving in a brand new gaming chair and a TV. Meanwhile, I was expected to sleep on the couch. I spent one last night in my house, listening to Ethan snore in my bed. Then, the next morning, I handed her an official notice to vacate. She laughed. "What's this supposed to be?" I crossed my arms. It means you have 30 days to get out of my house. Her face went pale. Your house? I pulled out the deed and pointed at my name. Yes. My house. That's when the begging started. First, she tried to play the guilt card. But we're family. Then, the gaslighting. You're really going to throw your own mother out on the street? Then, the rage. She screamed at me, called me ungrateful, said Uncle Robert would be ashamed of me. Then she collapsed, sobbing, on the floor. But I didn't budge. I gave her exactly 30 days. Ethan tried to act tough, but when he realized I was serious, he stopped talking altogether. Frank showed up once, demanding I reconsider. I showed him the trespassing laws and told him to leave before I called the cops. And finally, on the 30th day, my mom left. She didn't even say goodbye. Ethan flipped me off as he walked out. I don't know where they are now, and honestly, I don't care. I have my house back. And I know one thing for sure, Uncle Robert would be damn proud. For the first time in weeks, I had peace. No Ethan. No Frank. No more entitled demands from my mother. Just silence. But peace didn't last long. 3 weeks after they left, I started noticing little things. At first, it was just noises. The sound of someone walking outside my house late at night. The porch light flickering when I knew I had replaced the bulb. The distinct feeling that I was being watched whenever I came home after work. Then, one night, I found muddy footprints on the back porch. Too big to be mine. That was when I knew, it wasn't over. The first attack one evening, I came home and found the front door unlocked. I never left it unlocked. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, scanning every corner of the house. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then I walked into the kitchen, and saw a note on the counter. Enjoy it while you can. No name. No signature. Just those words, scribbled in ugly, jagged handwriting. I checked every lock, every window. Nothing was broken. No sign of forced entry. Someone had a key. I changed the locks the next morning. But it didn't stop. A few days later, I woke up to find my tires slashed. All 4 of them. 2 nights after that, someone threw a rock through my living room window. The cops didn't do much. They took a report, told me to get security cameras, and basically said, let us know if anything else happens. So, I did exactly that, I installed cameras. And that's when I finally saw him. Caught on camera, the footage wasn't crystal clear, but it didn't need to be. Ethan. 2:37 a.m. Dressed in black, hood up, creeping around my backyard like some discount burglar. The next morning, I drove straight to Frank's house. My mother answered the door. She looked rough. Her hair was unkempt, dark circles under her eyes. I could smell cigarettes and something else, alcohol, maybe? We need to talk, I said, holding up my phone with the video of Ethan. She glanced at it and sighed. Oh, sweetheart, he's just upset. He was so comfortable there. You really can't blame him for, I can, actually, I cut in. And if he sets foot on my property again, I'm pressing charges. That got her attention. You wouldn't, she said. I leaned in. Try me. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. I know you're mad, but you don't understand. We're struggling, okay? We lost everything. Frank had to sell his truck, and I'm working double shifts just to keep up with rent. I yanked my arm away. Not my problem. She let out a bitter laugh. Wow. Robert really ruined you, huh? That was it. That was the moment I knew, she wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was angry that she couldn't use me anymore. So I walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A new nightmare week passed with no incidents. I started to relax. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of fire. I smelled it before I saw it, thick, choking smoke seeping under my bedroom door. My chest tightened as I jumped out of bed, heart pounding. I ran to the living room, and saw flames licking up my front door. Someone had set my porch on fire. Adrenaline took over. I grabbed the fire extinguisher and put out the flames before they spread. My hands shook as I stumbled back, coughing. My head spun from the smoke. When I caught my breath, I ran to check the cameras. And there it was. Ethan. Again. Except this time, he wasn't alone. Frank. My own mother's husband, standing there, watching as Ethan poured gasoline all over my porch. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. This wasn't just some petty revenge. This was arson. I called the cops. This time, they took it seriously. They arrested Ethan the next day. Frank wasn't home when they came, but they were looking for him. My mom? She showed up at my house later that day, pounding on the door. When I didn't answer, she screamed at the cameras instead. "This is your fault. You turned your back on us. You did this to your own family." I watched from the window, arms crossed, as she ranted and raved. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was furious. Because I fought back. Because I refused to let her walk all over me. She finally left when the neighbors started watching. I knew this wasn't over. But what she didn't know. I had a plan. Ethan was arrested. Frank was on the run. My mom was losing her mind. But somehow, this still wasn't over. I thought with Ethan in jail, things would settle down. That maybe, finally, I could breathe. But if there was one thing I should have learned by now, it was that my mother didn't know how to let go. And neither did Frank. The bail surprised 3 days after Ethan's arrest. I got a notification from the county website. Ethan was released. Someone had paid his bail. I had a sick feeling I already knew who. And I was right. My mother. I knew this because, later that night, my cameras caught something, a car creeping down my street. Stopping right in front of my house. Then, a figure getting out and standing there, just watching. Ethan. I called the cops again, told them about the footage. But because he wasn't technically violating any law just by standing there, they couldn't do much. Still, they agreed to patrol my street more often. That night, I barely slept. Every noise made my skin crawl. I kept my baseball bat next to me. Just in case. The next morning, I got a letter in my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Just a folded-up sheet of paper shoved inside. I opened it. "This isn't over. You owe us." My stomach dropped. The missing deed the next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't trust it. So I started double-checking everything in the house. The locks. The cameras. The windows. Then, on a hunch, I went to the safe where I kept all my important documents, birth certificate, bank information, and most importantly, the deed to my house. Except, when I opened the safe, it was gone. I tore through everything, thinking maybe I misplaced it. But no. Everything else was still there. Only the deed was missing. I felt sick. I replayed the last few weeks in my head. Had I left it out? Had someone been inside without me knowing? Then, I remembered something. My mom. The day she came banging on my door, screaming at my cameras. I had been so focused on her tantrum that I hadn't even checked the back door. Had she sent someone around the back while she distracted me? I checked the security footage from that day. And my blood ran cold. Because while she was screaming at my front door, Frank was at my back door. He wasn't there long. Only a couple of minutes. But long enough to slip inside and take something small, like a folded piece of paper. Like the deed to my house. The fake claim I wanted to believe they couldn't actually do anything with it. That a stolen document wouldn't hold up in court. But a few days later, I got a notice in the mail. A legal notice. A claim had been filed against the house. The document was fake as hell. It looked like something someone threw together in Microsoft Word, claiming that the house rightfully belonged to my mother as Uncle Robert's closest next of kin. It was ridiculous. But it was also just real enough to cause problems. Because now, there was a case. And I had to fight it. The war begins. I hired a lawyer the next day. It wasn't cheap, but Uncle Robert had left me some money in his will, and I was damn sure going to use it to protect his house. The lawyer took one look at the claim and scoffed. "This is garbage," he said. "But it's still going to take some time to clean up." Meanwhile, my mom was celebrating. She posted online about how she was getting the family home back. She told her friends I had stolen it from her. And she started acting like she already won. She even had the audacity to call me. "You're just dragging this out for nothing," she said, her voice dripping with smugness. "You know you can't afford a real legal battle. Just sign it over and be done with it." I laughed. "See you in court," I told her, and hung up. But I knew I had to be careful. If they were desperate enough to forge legal documents, what else were they willing to do? The answer came sooner than I expected. The break-in had happened 3 nights later. I woke up to a loud crash. Glass shattering. I jumped out of bed, grabbed the baseball bat, and checked the cameras. 2 figures. Frank and Ethan. Trying to force their way in. I grabbed my phone and called 911. My hands were shaking. "Someone's breaking into my house," I said. "Right now." The dispatcher told me to stay inside and wait for the officers to arrive. But I wasn't just going to wait. I turned on every single light in the house. Then, I walked to the front door and unlocked it. Not to let them in. To let them hear me locking and loading my shotgun. I didn't even have to say anything. They ran. The cops caught Ethan a block away. Frank got away, for now. But this was no longer just about a house. This was war. And I wasn't going down without a fight. Frank was still out there. Ethan had been arrested again, but that meant nothing. My mother had bailed him out once before, what was stopping her from doing it again? And Frank? He was dangerous. He had already tried to break into my house, already helped his son commit arson. The cops were looking for him, but that didn't comfort me. Not when I knew he would do whatever it took to win. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, my mother sued me. The courtroom showdown her claim on the house had already been rejected once for lack of evidence. But she wasn't giving up. She filed again, using Ethan's arrest as a sob story, claiming that he had nowhere to go, that I had unlawfully thrown them out when they were co-owners of the house. It was laughable. But it meant one thing: we had to go to court. I showed up with my lawyer. My mother showed up with hers. And to my utter shock, Frank was there too. They had found him. Or rather, he turned himself in. But not because he felt guilty. No. It was because he had a plan. He walked in, bold as ever, wearing a cheap suit and acting like he belonged there. Like he wasn't the same guy who had tried to burn my house down. And when the judge asked if anyone had anything to say before we started, Frank stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement." I clenched my jaw. What was he playing at? And then, he dropped a bombshell. The secret that changed everything: Robert was not the rightful owner of that house, Frank announced, his voice steady, calculated. "And I have proof." The courtroom fell silent. I turned to my lawyer, but he looked just as confused as I was. "What the hell is he talking about?" I muttered. Then, Frank pulled out a folder and handed it to the judge. "These are documents showing that the house originally belonged to Robert and his brother, my wife's late husband. My wife has just as much right to that house as he does." The breath left my body. This wasn't a claim. This was real. And suddenly, I understood. This whole time, my mother had been half right. The house wasn't just Uncle Robert's. It had once belonged to both my uncle and my dad. And when my dad passed away, the ownership should have legally gone to his next of kin. Me. Not my mom. Me. I had won the house fair and square because Uncle Robert had left it to me in his will. But now, with this new information, my mother saw an opening. She wasn't entitled to the house, but she was trying to use my father's name to stake a claim. And I realized something else, something even worse. Frank had been holding on to this information the entire time. He could have used it earlier. He could have done this months ago. But he had waited. Waited for Ethan to get arrested. Waited until they had nothing left. Waited until my mother was desperate enough to let him take control. And now? He was trying to steal my father's house right out from under me. The explosion. I didn't even wait for my lawyer. I stood up. "You knew," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You knew this the whole time, and you waited until you needed a way out." Frank smirked. "Just business, kid." And my mother? She wouldn't even look at me. I felt something inside me snap. "You don't get to use my dad's name for this," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "He wouldn't want you anywhere near that house." Frank opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, my mother finally spoke. "Enough," she whispered. Her voice was quiet. But the way she said it? It wasn't directed at me. She was looking at Frank. "You told me we wouldn't have to do this," she said, her voice breaking. "You said it was already ours." Frank shrugged. "It is. We just have to fight for it. And that was it. That was the moment she realized. Frank never cared about the house. He only cared about winning. My mother staggered back. She started, shaking her head. You told me we just had to wait him out. You told me it would work out in our favor. Frank laughed. And I was right, wasn't I? But now, she was looking at me. And for the first time in years, maybe my entire life, I saw a real regret on her face. It wasn't enough. Not after everything she had done. But it was something. And then, she made the decision that changed everything. She turned back to the judge. And she said, I want to drop the case. Frank lost his damn mind. You can't just back out, he shouted. We can win this. But my mother just shook her head. No. We can't. And for the first time in her life, she accepted defeat. The judge dismissed the case. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. But my mother? She stopped me before I could leave. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't answer. Because in the end, she hadn't done it for me. She had done it because she finally saw who Frank really was. And maybe, just maybe, she finally saw who I had been all along. Someone who had never been on her side. Because she had never been on mine. I kept the house. Frank went back to hiding from the law. Ethan got another slap on the wrist and disappeared from my life. And my mother? She tried to reach out a few times. A text here, a voicemail there. But I never answered. Some betrayals cut too deep. Uncle Robert was right. I needed to save my money. Because one day, I would need it to fight for what was mine. And now? Now, I live in my house. My father's house. My uncle's house. The house they tried to take from me. But I won. And I know one thing for sure. They will never take anything from me again.